Local Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authorities, or LIDAs, are responsible for submitting transfers for home and community-based services, or HCS, and Texas Home Living waiver programs. This includes 3608 and 8582 Transfer Individual Plans of Care, or IPCs, and Individual Movement, or IMT, Local Authority, or LA reassignments. As part of the transfer process, it's important you submit any necessary forms in the correct order to prevent issues from occurring. During this video, we'll look at several transfer scenarios and discuss best practices for entering transfers in the correct order. We recommend you reference Appendix A Scenarios for selecting an IMT purpose and IPC type in the LTC, HCS, and Texas Home Living Waiver Programs Provider User Guide for help determining the order which forms should be submitted. You can also watch the two-part Appendix A video series located in the HCS and Texas Home Living YouTube playlist. First, let's talk about a few things you should do before entering a transfer. Use Form Status Inquiry, or FSI, to search for and address any older forms that aren't in status Processed Complete. Also, look for forms in status Pending DADS Review, and make sure all required documentation is submitted for these forms. You can refer to Appendix B in the LTC, HCS, and Texas Home Living Waiver Programs Provider User Guide to determine what documentation needs to be submitted. If a renewal IPC is needed, make sure that the transfer IPC is in status Processed Complete before entering the renewal. If you don't see any previous forms on the Long-Term Care or LTC online portal or service authorizations in TextMed Connect, MeSave, for the transferring individual, this most likely means that the transfer IPC hasn't reached status Processed Complete. We'll talk about this more later in this video. Review auto-populated data on subsequent forms to make sure the correct provider or LIDA is shown. Now, let's review some transfer scenarios. Remember that you can refer to Appendix A in the LTC, HCS, and Texas Home Living Waiver Programs Provider User Guide for a list of transfer scenarios and the order in which forms should be submitted. This first scenario only applies to individuals who are in their own home or a family home. An individual has a change in county, contract, and LIDA. The transferring LIDA first needs to submit an IMT-LA reassignment to update the LIDA, address, and county. After the IMT-LA reassignment is initiated by the transferring LIDA, the receiving LIDA receives an alert on the LTC online portal and must acknowledge the form. Once the IMT-LA reassignment is in status Processed Complete, the receiving LIDA must submit the transfer IPC to update the contract. On the IMT-LA reassignment, the transferring LIDA checks the box next to field 11A, Is provider also changing, to indicate that the provider on the form is changing. You'll notice that field 111, New Location Code, is disabled on the IMT-LA reassignment when the provider is also changing. This means that the receiving LIDA needs to enter the new location code on the transfer IPC. Remember, the transfer IPC can only be entered and submitted once the IMT-LA reassignment is in status Processed Complete. When the effective date of a transfer is the same as the effective date of a renewal, LIDAs need to submit the IPC transfer at renewal instead of submitting two separate transfer and renewal forms. In a scenario where a transfer is occurring before a renewal is due, the LIDA first needs to submit the transfer IPC. Then, either the receiving HCS provider or LIDA needs to enter the renewal IPC. Remember, LIDAs will enter renewals for all individuals enrolled in Texas Home Living and individuals enrolled in HCS who are self-directing all their services. In the event the renewal IPC is entered and is in status processed complete before the transfer IPC is processed, the renewal IPC will need to be inactivated and then re-entered. The form submitter will know this has occurred because they'll see a renewal is populating with the transferring provider's information. The transferring provider will need to contact HHSC to have any service authorizations removed. Reference the LTC, HCS, and Texas Home Living Waiver Programs Provider User Guide for more information on submitting transfers. You can also visit the HCS and Texas Home Living playlist on YouTube for more helpful videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the TMHP YouTube channel. Thanks!